Cool, man. So appreciate for answering my invite.
You're welcome.
And first of all, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nathan Kiely, and I'm an athletic performance coach based in Brisbane in Australia. And I'm currently responsible for the speed and rehab or reconditioning programs at the Brisbane Broncos, who compete in the National Rugby League competition here. Prior to that, I spent 3.5 years working at Cricket New South Wales, so working in a completely different sport. Pretty lucky to work in that environment. Cricket New South Wales is a really big producer of Australian cricket talent, so we had a lot of Australian players come through and remain in our system. So obviously they compete at the highest level there. And then prior to that, worked in a variety of different roles. High school setting for a few years, where I worked with rugby union, basketball, cricket, a variety of different sports there. Also worked with rugby league academy at the Sydney Roosters, and then also as a speed and agility coach with a guy named Roger Fabry, who's quite a well-known speed and agility coach in Sydney, and he works with a lot of elite athletes in their off seasons. So I was very lucky to sort of be mentored and learn a lot from Roger while I was a young coach as well. Outside of that, did an undergraduate degree in sport and exercise science at the University of Technology in Sydney, and did an honours research project there as well, where I studied biomechanics and performance correlates in cricket fast bowlers, which is sort of what led to my role in cricket there, having the connection through research. And that's pretty much me and my sort of professional journey to this point in a nutshell, I suppose.
Cool, man. So did the beard gonna get like longer or like bigger when your career went longer?
Oh, no, it's gotten longer than this before, mostly during lockdown. I was a bit disheveled at different points there, but no, it's well, maybe as I get older and wiser, it'll get longer too. But trying to keep it as neat and tidy as possible in the meantime.
I noticed that like years ago you only had like these, right?
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
man.
I
But I
just
love
one day
this.
thought I'll give the beard a go and see if I can grow one, and yeah, it's sort of stayed ever since, I guess.
Cool, man. Cool. So since you start as a performance coach or a strength and conditioning coach, how did you become like a speed coach and do the rehabilitation at the same time?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of combination of roles. I don't think too many clubs have it structured that way. I think when my boss was looking for someone to fill this particular role, there were kind of those two gaps in the program in terms of expertise within the staff. And yeah, luckily I sort of come from a background where working in cricket previously, we didn't have like rehabilitation coaches. So all of our strength and conditioning staff, um, whatever area you're working in, you still had to look after rehab athletes. So I had a little bit of experience in that area, but primarily we were looking for someone to do a good job running the speed program. And that's definitely sort of more of my niche, I suppose. Um, like I mentioned before, when I was a young coach, I was quite lucky to spend a bit of time under the tutelage of Roger Fabry. So um, I would have spent probably 12 to 18 months working with Roger, basically cones and a stopwatch and a field, and that's pretty much all you've got at your disposal. And you're working with young athletes, trying to help improve their running mechanics and giving them feedback and trying to drive intensity in their training so that you can make them faster. And I suppose my passion for speed training sort of evolved in that time, and it's always been something that I've been quite passionate about, and something I do in my own training. And while I was working in cricket, typically if we're doing a speed warm up, I'm responsible for taking that and And yeah, now in my role that I'm in at the moment, a day will typically involve taking a speed warm up for our NRL players, taking them through some running mechanics, doing some speed exposures, and then after that, I'll transition over and grab whoever's in rehab at the time, and we'll go into some reconditioning with them or whatever's been planned for them on any given day.
Cool, man. Cool, man. It's I think it's special. It's kind of special because, like in our industry, it usually doesn't work that way, right? Not just other clubs.
Yeah, I think the two roles are really complementary. I'm sure you'd agree, but I think having a skill set in speed it can inform what you do in rehabilitation really well in terms of you're going to have a good understanding and a good skill set around drill progressions, your plyometric progressions, your running exposures, how you expose them to higher velocities over time, building back into their movement efficiency, and also trying to make sure that their movements are safe and repeatable. And then obviously you're just layering capacity and repeatability on top of that through your progressions. So I find that they're really complementary roles, and it works quite well in our environment where like I said, I can take uninjured athletes who are ready to train through their speed work, and then straight after that transition into some reconditioning based stuff with our rehab athletes. And at times that might not be speed based. We could be doing traditional conditioning or conditioning drills and other elements of rehab. But like you mentioned, there's definitely good opportunities to work on running mechanics, running technique, and good chances to play around with different things as well. Like I may not realize it, but sometimes your rehab athletes are really cool guinea pigs to try new drills and new exercises with, and figure out dimensions for different stuff that you can then drip feed back into the main program as well. Because obviously you got a bit more time with those guys, and you can take the time to build up intensity and things like that with exercises and drills. So really complementary sort of responsibilities, I guess.
Cool, man. Cool. So I noticed that when you like train, you often use you often use velocity based training, the tracking machine, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say machine. I should say tech, whatever.
Yep.
So why you use velocity based training?
I think velocity-based training can be a bit of a rabbit hole that people can get caught up in and go too far to an extreme with it. So for me personally, it's all about driving intent and understanding my daily max. So I know based on previous training data, if I'm doing let's take a back squat as a case study, if I'm working up to a heavy double and I haven't prescribed any percentages, as I'm working up, I might hit 120 on the back squat for whatever set of 3. And I can look at the velocities of that, and it sort of helps me understand where I'm at from a readiness perspective, because I've always hit 120 as a build up. So I know on a good day, I'm moving the bar at whatever velocity, and on a bad day, I'm moving it slower than that. And that allows me to start predicting what my next progressions will be. So if I know, okay, I'm moving the bar fast, that means I'm feeling good and things are going well, I can take bigger jumps in my build-ups and aim for a heavier top set. And vice versa, if it's slow, I know, okay, today is probably not the day to try and break any records. I'll just take smaller jumps, and my heaviest top set will be a little bit lighter. So that's one reason to use it. And then secondary to that is I can be lifting the same weight. Say I'm using a percentage-based method, and I can track progress just by changes in bar speed. So if I'm doing a block of training where I'm going to regularly hit 85% of my 1RM for a set of 3, if my mean velocity in that top set of 85% increases over time, then that's feedback that I can use to know that my training is working because I'm starting to move the same weight faster. What I think people get caught up in and the rabbit hole is that they start using velocity-based training to profile athletes. And I'm not entirely convinced about the usefulness of profiling. I think a lot of it is based on like pseudo training theory. We understand that just because something fits into a neat little square and the profile says that you're force deficient or velocity deficient, that doesn't necessarily mean that an intervention based on that profiling will lead to better performance outcomes in the competition exercise. So I just think that you need to be wary with that as well. So I look at the gym as general physical preparation. And I think when you understand the limitations of GPP, it sort of sets you free to just go and do it really well, rather than trying to chase specificity in GPP, which I think is a bit of a fool's errand, personally.
Cool. So you mentioned that for like velocity profiling, right? Am I using it right? You're not really convinced. But there's a like trend in our industry, like doing a lot of like testing for like profiling these kind of stuff. So when it comes to like you're gonna train your athlete, you're gonna stay with is it gonna stay with like where you just mentioned like GPP, SPP?
Yeah, I think for the most part, as a strength and conditioning coach, we are GPP coaches. Now, that's not to say that specificity is not important. If you look at how I train and you look at how I train my athletes, there are elements that are specific. So there still needs to be some degree of specificity. Like if I want you to get better at jumping, I can't just give you bicep curls, right? That's too far removed from a specificity perspective. But if I take a back squat and try and chase specificity within it, I think that's where we get in trouble. So from a, say, jumping perspective, a back squat, we know, yeah, okay, we're using the same muscles, same sort of movement pattern. Cool, that's a general exercise. I'm just going to try and get good at a back squat. And there's going to be different times where, yeah, we focus on lighter, faster, heavy, slow. But if I go down that rabbit hole of profiling with velocity-based training and I try and chase specificity within GPP, then you just end up confusing yourself and you end up not doing anything well. And the other thing that's really important to consider is that there is an inverse relationship between specificity and the capacity for overload. So the more specific something is, the less ability we have to overload it. Now, I think we all inherently understand this, right? This is the reason that we train. If you could overload something that's highly specific, then we would just play the game, do the competition exercise. That would be enough to reach peak performance. But we actually need to remove specificity so that we can target other elements that underpin performance, overload them, build the threshold or ceiling or capacity to perform those, and then we reintegrate that into our sporting skill. Now, if you just try and only go for specificity, this is what I call like, some coaches, they go like full Bosch, right? There's no overload. It's all specific. Everything we're doing is, it's fluff. It becomes all fluff, right? At no point are you actually getting an overload in terms of complexity, force, or velocity. Those are the typical ways that we overload, right?
True.
But at the opposite end of the spectrum, if things are too general and you get this great degree of overload, then you can be too far removed. So this is where you get your special strength training, or you do layer in elements of specificity within your GPP. So an example of that might be, I understand that, okay, power clean is GPP. That's not specific. But I could contrast that with some sort of hip lock, single leg, plyometric, or jumping exercise that underpins or links back into something that we do on the field. And then we're starting to get a bit of a connection between the gym and the field. But other than that, I probably wouldn't try and go too much further than that in terms of specificity in the weights room.
Cool. So since you brought up like plyometric, I noticed that you often like combine like jumping high hurdles in your training, right? Did you like, is it like on the same day, and is it for like pure warm up or like other reasons?
When you say the same day, do you mean in terms of the same day as field work?
Sorry, same day as like, do you put in same day as, is it like for speed training or is it for strength training?
Yeah, so I think you can do either. You can keep it isolated in the gym, or you can do it on the field. You just need to be careful in terms of how we load tendons. If you give tendons like fast stretch shortening cycle loadings multiple times a day, you're going to get angry tendons. So what I'll generally do is consolidate tendon loading into one session. So we might have a field session in the morning and weights in the afternoon. If I want to do fast stretch shortening cycle plyometrics, I'll do them on the field as part of the field prep. So we'll warm up the guys. We might do hurdle jumps like you mentioned, like continuous hurdle jumps, do our speed work, do our field session where they're doing skills, conditioning, etc. And then if we're coming into the weight room that afternoon, I'm not doing any fast stretch shortening cycle plyos. We might do some slow stretch shortening cycle jumps, more like a counter movement jump or a hurdle jump where we're sticking the landing, something like that. That's probably more appropriate. But that fast energy storage and release, personally, I don't think it's a good idea to be doing that multiple times a day. However, if we've got a field session that is very light in nature, we might call it like a craft session where players are just working on core catch and pass skills. They're not moving fast. They're not doing hard conditioning, things like that. The morning on the field, then in the afternoon, we shortening cycle plies into our strength and power training session, because that's probably a better environment where the guys are really warm. We've got a chance to warm their tendons up more appropriately, and we can integrate some technology to drive intensity into the plyos. So we might get a contact mat out or the force plates, whatever, something where we can start generating scores, put numbers behind outputs, and then get a leaderboard going on the TV, and that's when you get a lot more intensity out of the athletes once they're able to compete on something. But yeah, like I said, you can do it either way. You can do it in the gym or on the field. You just need to be careful with how you're organizing it based on the bigger picture of what's happening in the program.
Cool. So I also noticed that you do a lot of like step up, right? And when you do step up, it's kind of like different than what I usually do. So I usually do with like step up with, let's say, my left leg, and I'm gonna drop with my I'm gonna stand up with my left leg and do eccentric with the same leg. But I noticed that you step up with one leg and land with the other leg. Why is that?
To be honest, I don't think it matters. You can do either. I've done both at different times. It's just a personal preference of mine when I'm doing more sort of dynamic step ups, just in the habit of doing it that way. I don't think, so, and this is the thing, I think we get caught up on the X's and O's of how things are done sometimes. And then it's also worthwhile just taking a step back and going, oh, some stuff doesn't matter. So, if I have an athlete doing it one way and the guy next to him's doing it differently, I'm not going to say anything because I just don't care.
Cool, man. Appreciate it, man.
Sometimes things move the needle and sometimes they don't. And if something doesn't move a needle, it doesn't materially make a change, don't get caught up on it.
Okay, appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. So next thing is, you put a lot of like different types of like hamstring strength exercise in your program, right? So, why is there a lot of like hamstring strength? Or
I probably don't do a lot of hamstring strength, but what I do is a lot of variety in my hamstring training. And this is personally for my own training. It doesn't necessarily reflect what we do with our athletes on the whole. I suppose the reason is I'm looking to try and create the most robust, resilient hamstring muscle group I can. And that sort of variety, which is the spice of life, keeps that hamstring muscle complex, if you like, resilient in all sorts of different movement patterns, in different planes, at different ends of the muscle belly, and through different muscle contraction types. So throughout the course of, let's say, a 3 or 4 week training cycle, I'll look to do hip dominant, slow eccentric type movement, hip dominant isometric type action, and hip dominant fast concentric type action. Then I'm also looking for something that's really targeting the mid belly of the hamstring, and that'll typically be more isometric in nature. But if possible, in my mind, I'd love to be able to do something that's heavy, slow eccentric, isometric, fast concentric. It's a little bit difficult with the mid belly just in terms of the muscle joint angles and whatnot. And then the same thing at the distal side of the hamstring. On top of that, I'm also looking to layer in different elements of rotation through the pelvis, so that we can load laterally through the medial component, and then also through the center of the muscle belly as well. So it's just about trying to target it holistically from all different angles, different muscle contraction types and whatnot. That's a personal preference of mine. What I found was that previously, and this is in my own training, I always had niggly hamstrings. Like, I reckon I was just walking around with a grade 1 hamstring all the time. So what I tried to do was really get strong in my hamstrings through as much different movement pattern types as possible. And anecdotally, N of 1, so take it with a grain of salt. Since I started using that approach, I've had no issues with my hamstrings at all. And that's what's worked for me.
Cool. So, why didn't you put these hamstring exercise in your athletes program?
Well, I do, but probably don't go to the same extent that I do with myself. If I'm rehabilitating an athlete with a hamstring muscle injury, I am going to expose them to a lot more hamstring training variety, hit them from different angles and whatnot. The challenge, I suppose, is that for me, as a pseudo sort of athlete, I'm not an athlete, but for me, like, I don't have to deal with the same running demands as a field sport athlete. So I can control what I do on the field. Whereas for them, there is a lot more variety in what's going to happen in skill sessions and in games. So we can't just keep layering more and more and more and more on them, because at some point you're going to tip them over the edge, right? So we still have an approach where we target the hamstring muscles from different angles, and we hit them with different muscle contraction types. But the overall total training volume that we would give them, and also the the breadth of the variety is a little bit narrower, just because the other part of the equation too is that, like, for me, when I'm training, my running is very linear in nature, but for them, their field sessions are 360 degrees. So the hamstring muscles are actually getting stimulated in a greater variety of ways from running, if that makes sense. So they're getting more of that robustness and resilience on the field versus needing to sort of fill those gaps in the gym.
Oh, so like you train like speed, linear speed, right? So you need to like put up with different angle, different stimulus for the hamstring. Cool. But do you like train speed and the gym work at the same day or a different day?
Yeah, that depends on. Are you talking specifically about myself, or are you talking about the athletes that I coach?
Yourself.
For myself, yeah. So the way I train myself is that I'll do a speed, like, field session day only. Then I'll follow that by a lower body weights day only, and then an upper body weights day only, and then I'll repeat that 3-day split again.
Oh.
And then I just sort of, that could be however many days a week based on what else is going on in my life. If I've got a barbecue on the weekend, I'm probably going to skip a session here and there. Like, I'm not too regimented with my training, but if I can train 5 days a week, like, I'm doing a pretty good job. But then for our athletes, they're more often going to be doing double days where they've got field and then weights in the afternoon. So there's a lot more complex, a lot more variables to consider for them. Whereas, yeah, for myself, it's pretty controllable.
Cool. So since we are both a performance coach and you're gonna train athletes, how do you like microdose? I don't know if I'm using the word right, but how do you like microdose the strength training or like speed training to cooperate with the team schedule? Like, let's say, yeah.
I suppose, like, we don't microdose strength. Like, we train strength pretty much all year round because the nature of our sport, there's so much contact and collision that you basically need to be as big and strong and powerful as possible in every position. It's just a non-negotiable. Like, if you're small, skinny, and weak, you're going to get hurt. So from that perspective, we're always trying to improve strength, power, lean muscle mass. There's never a phase of the year where we really pull back and stop trying to get better in that space. Having said that, obviously we have weeks where we go a little bit lighter and whatnot based on if we've got a short turnaround or whatever. The speed side of things, we do microdose that a little bit more because of the nature of field sports. You can have athletes who do get speed exposures within training and games that are uncontrolled and just part of the skill session or the execution of skills. And we try to complement that with our speed program. So we integrate in with our sports science department. They look at what the athletes have done in the last week. Did they run fast in the game? Did they run fast in training? We look back at our athlete profiles and we say, okay, what who can tolerate more sprinting, who tolerates less, what sort of sprinting do we think they need to get more of, whether their position and profile indicates that they need more acceleration type work or top speed work. And then we build out our speed intervention for like the first training session of the week. So we typically play one game. Well, we always play one game per week. So we've sort of got like between a 5 and 8 day turnaround between games based on the schedule. So our first training session of the week will generally be where we do our speed exposures. So we look back at that last week. What do we need? What do you need as an individual? And then we'll put our athletes sort of in like 3 buckets, 3 groups. And then we've got 3 coaches who'll then take them through their relevant speed intervention for the day. Some athletes, it'll be, let's run fast. We're going to drill you, get you warm, and then you're going to get 2 or 3 max velocity exposures. Another athlete, it might be 2 or 3 acceleration exposures because of their position and their needs. And then we might have other athletes that don't need to run fast. They run a heap of very high speed running and sprint running the week prior. So we'll just do some running mechanics, some extensive drilling, get them hitting good positions, get strong in those positions, a couple of little stride throughs just to make sure they're warm, and then they can integrate into skills from there.
Cool. So you mentioned like that for training your athletes, you probably need to like all year round, you probably need to like try to make them stronger, right? So I think in the off season, it's probably easier, but when it comes to like in season, how do you do that?
Yeah, so we'll generally try and get 6 strength sessions per month with our athletes. Some of the younger, more developmental athletes will get more. We'll look for more opportunities to do a weight session with them, and they are less likely to play as often as well. So there's more opportunities in their schedule. But basically, when we're in the gym, like we're trying to, like the session is framed around getting bigger, stronger, faster. So we're quite prescriptive in our program. We've got numbers on your program, and you're expected to, for the most part, follow them as an athlete, unless you've got a good reason not to. And then we're always trying to drive competition and intent in the session. So something like velocity-based training is a great tool. We can use any metric you like, but Gym Aware, which is what we use, has a really cool leaderboard function. So we can just plug the laptop into the TV, and all the guys' names come up and ranks them in order for any given lift on the day, whether it's a wattage or mean bar speed at a given weight. And by nature, they want to compete. They're athletes. So in a team setting, they're all trying to hit their numbers, move the bar fast. Other ways that we can do it are, like we mentioned, some of the jumps and things like that. If we're using force platforms, again, a leaderboard can go up, and we're trying to see who can jump the highest on a counter movement jump. Any way that you can measure something, sort of. I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Holler and his Feed the Cats speed program. He talks about record, rank, and publish, and that's how he drives intent and competition in his program. So he records the results, he ranks players, and then he makes sure that they get feedback by publishing it, and getting that sort of like a leaderboard up for athletes. I'll do the same. I'll then use that data in the afternoon and create like a little like an infographic with the top 3 players, big picture of them, their scores, and I'll chuck that in the team's group WhatsApp. So again, there's that reminder, just as they get home, like, oh yeah, I made the top 3 today. Like that, again, they're athletes, they want to compete, and we've all got egos. If you see yourself at the top of the leaderboard, like that gives you that hit of dopamine. You feel really good, and those other guys who might not be there that day, they go, oh, I want to make it on the leaderboard. And again, it's all about driving intent in the session, and the more ways that we can gamify things, make it's more fun, it's more engaging. I think that really helps to continue to push athletes to be the best that they can in the gym. We also have like a strength leaderboard up on the wall in the gym, personal records, and they roll over every month. So if you kind of got to defend your title, like you can't just get your PB in the middle of preseason and then just hang on to it all year. Just ways like that. It's easier in a team environment where you can get the guys to compete amongst themselves, but we don't tend to have too many problems continuing to have the athletes lifting heavy weights and doing so with intent in season. There is definitely a change in the total volume from what we could do in a heavy preseason block, where we would be able to lift like 4 days a week quite regularly. But once we get in season, like I said, it's one or two quality sessions a week in the gym. And we're kind of just trying to hang on for dear life as best we can by maximizing the intensity of those sessions.
So, does that mean that your athlete need to like in the weight room, they need to probably like peak a lot?
Well, our season is very long. So we have 26 rounds. Like I said, one game a week. There's some bye weeks where players have the weekend off. And then if you make finals, it ends up being like a 32-week season, right? So there are going to be peaks and troughs. You can't stay up all year round. And we're not standing behind an athlete and screaming and making them lift something that they don't have the capacity to lift. There's always that ongoing conversation with them around how they're feeling, their readiness. But we build that into our program as well. Like, we understand that there's going to be some wiggle room in terms of how much they can lift. So ideally, we don't want them falling away, but you can't expect athletes to just PB and PB and PB all the time, or stay super close to their PBs. But if we've got an athlete once every 4 to 6 weeks getting close to like a training max, that's a pretty good indication that they're retaining that their strength and power qualities throughout the course of that long season. If we're lucky enough to make finals, then we will start to strip a bit of volume out and get the athletes feeling good. But again, the intensity stays in the program. We still want, if possible, we want to hit a heavy single the week before going into a grand final, and some guys might even PB. Like, that's again that huge dopamine rush. Like, if you can walk into a grand final knowing that you're in peak physical condition, you're going to have a lot of confidence and things like that as well. So we try our best not to sort of let them fall away.
So is it kind of like they kind of get stronger over the season, and when they need to like go to the championship, it's probably the strongest moment at the year, right?
It can be. It's very individual. So if you're over 25 years of age, it's not as easy to do that, right? Like, they've got their bodies are going to be beaten up from years of playing professional contact sport, so they've probably got a heap of injuries. They're probably one of the senior players, so they've probably played a lot of minutes in every game, and they're less trainable. They're towards the top end of their threshold in terms of their physical development. However, if we've got a young developmental athlete, then if you're 18, 19, 20 years old, there's no reason you can't get stronger and improve performance throughout the course of the season. And often, we will see younger players who at the back end of the year are in better physical condition than when they were at the start.
Cool. So for like programming, how do you exactly like let your athlete get stronger during the season? Is it like some coaches do like wave loading, some use like easy strength? For you guys, how exactly do you program?
Yeah, I think you wouldn't be able to categorize it with like a simple name. It's a concurrent approach primarily, in terms of we are always targeting, we're always hitting all qualities in our program. There will be different times where we emphasize particular areas, and that's often driven by individual needs. There is a waiving type component to how it's periodized in season. So that could be over, we typically program in like a 4 to 6 week block. And the waiving of the program is heavily influenced by the match schedule. So if we have an 8-day turnaround at some point in the training block, so 8 days between games, then that presents itself as an opportunity to lift heavy and hard. And we might have a marker set in there where we're working up to like a heavy 2, all right? And then we can predict a training 1RM from that. Vice versa, if we've got a short turnaround, a 5-day turnaround between games, we might only get 1 strength session in that week. And the total volume that we would expose the athletes to in that might be less. And the intensity might be a little bit lower as well, based on which day of the week it is coming off the back of the last game. So it's influenced by the schedule. It's very dynamic, and we work in a complex, it's a complex environment. So you can't just layer some program that you found on Men's Health or T Nation on top of these athletes and expect it to work, because that would not be respecting the complexity of team and field sports and schedules and things like that as well. So yeah, like I said, it's primarily driven by the match demands, and we're looking for opportunities to push and threats where we need to pull back.
Cool, man. I love this. I love this answer. So, last thing before I let you go, okay? I noticed that there's some online program on your website, right? And there's like speed program and some hamstring strength, right? So if there's like coaches or therapists are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you, and where can they find the online program?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I've got a few programs that I sell on there. I made a few for cricket athletes primarily. That's where I kind of started. I was still working cricket when I made those. But what I found was I just had so many inquiries from people who are athletes in team and field sports that I wanted to make more of a generic field sport athlete program. So that's the Alpha Athlete Wave Cycle. That program is pretty comprehensive. So it's strength and power training sessions in the gym, speed and agility for the field, and options for additional conditioning and things like that based on some metrics that are embedded into the program. A big focus of that program is the hamstring work, like you mentioned, and it's heavily influenced by how I train myself. So like I mentioned, the variety and the different angles, the different types of muscle contractions, that's all sort of a key element of that program as well. Basically, I just sell that through the link in my Instagram bio. So I don't actually have like my own website. I use a third party to host those programs. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, yeah, just jump onto my Instagram profile and go through the link on my bio. And yeah, if anyone's got any further questions or whatnot, yeah, my Instagram's a really good place to get in touch with me, just by sending me a direct message, just like you did, Eric. And always do my best to try and get back to as many people as possible. Sometimes I'm good at getting back straight away, sometimes I'm not. So if you don't hear back from me straight away, just keep annoying me and I'll probably answer eventually.
Cool, man. Cool.